The elderly woman reached into her worn purse and pulled out a single $20 bill. It was all she had left until next month. She looked at the restaurant menu, then at her twin daughters shivering in their thin coats, then back at the money in her trembling hand. Across the dimly lit dining room, a man in an expensive suit sat completely alone at a table set for 12, staring at an empty chair with tears streaming down his face. What happened next would change everything. Either of them thought they knew about Christmas. If stories like this touch your heart, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Sage Stories and join our family of people who believe in the power of human kindness. Hit that like button and share your own experiences of unexpected generosity in the comments below. We love hearing from you, and your stories inspire us every single day. Marcus Chen hadn't planned to spend Christmas Eve in a restaurant. For the past 23 years, his family had gathered at his estate for an elaborate celebration that his late wife, Rebecca, had started when their daughter was born. But Rebecca had been gone for 2 years now, and his daughter Emily was spending the holidays with her new in-laws in Colorado. His son David was stationed overseas with the military. His parents had both passed. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that made his chest ache with a loneliness he couldn't name. So Marcus, CEO of one of the largest technology firms in Seattle, had made a reservation at the Silver Pine, an upscale restaurant downtown that stayed open on holidays. He'd asked for their largest private dining room, thinking maybe he'd invite some colleagues, some business associates, perhaps the few friends he'd accumulated over decades of 16-hour workdays. But when his assistant called each person on the list, they all had family plans, every single one, and Marcus realized with a jolt that made him feel suddenly ancient, that he'd spent so many years building an empire that he'd forgotten to build a life. Now he sat at a table draped in white linen, surrounded by 12 empty chairs, picking at a meal that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. The food tasted like cardboard. The champagne felt heavy in his glass. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see families walking past on the snowy sidewalk, laughing, carrying presents, heading home to warmth and love and belonging. He'd give every dollar in his bank account to trade places with any of them. He didn't notice when the restaurant door opened and a woman and 2 small girls stepped inside, bringing a gust of freezing air with them. Sarah Mitchell had been debating this decision for the past 3 hours. She'd walked past the Silver Pine 4 times, each time losing her nerve, each time feeling more desperate and more foolish. Her daughters, Emma and Lily, were only 7 years old. They'd been so brave through everything, through their father walking out 6 months ago, through Sarah losing her job as a medical technician when the clinic downsized, through moving from their apartment to a single room in a budget motel on the outskirts of the city. They never complained. They shared everything. They told Sarah it was okay when she explained there wouldn't be presents this year. Not real ones, just little things from the dollar store. But today, Christmas Eve, Sarah had wanted to give them one good memory. One moment that felt normal and special and like the childhood they deserved. She'd been saving for weeks, skipping meals, walking instead of taking the bus, collecting cans for the recycling refund. She'd counted the money that morning and realized she had exactly enough for a modest dinner at a nice restaurant. Not the Silver Pine, obviously, but maybe the diner on 4th Street. But the diner had been packed with a 2-hour wait. And Emma had whispered that her feet hurt from walking and Lily's lips were turning blue from the cold. Then Sarah saw the Silver Pine, warm, nearly empty, and before she could talk herself out of it, she was pushing through the heavy wooden door. The hostess looked at them with barely concealed disapproval. Sarah's coat was frayed at the cuffs. The girls wore matching dresses that Sarah had sewn herself from discount fabric. Pretty but obviously homemade. They didn't belong here and everyone knew it. The hostess informed them in a clipped tone that, without a reservation, there were no tables available. Sarah felt her face burn with humiliation. She'd been foolish to think this would work. Emma gripped her hand tighter, trying to be brave, but Sarah could feel her daughter's disappointment radiating like heat. She was about to turn around and leave when a voice cut through the awkward silence. "They're with me." Marcus didn't know what made him say it. He'd been watching the interaction from his isolated corner, seeing the hope drain from the little girls' faces, recognizing something in the mother's eyes that looked like his own reflection. like someone drowning in loneliness and trying desperately not to let anyone see. Before his brain could catch up with his heart, he was standing walking toward them, repeating words that surprised him as much as they surprised everyone else. "These are my guests. We have plenty of room." The hostess's attitude transformed instantly. Sarah started to protest, stammering that there must be some mistake, but Marcus smiled at her, the first real smile that had touched his face in months, and said quietly, "Please, I insist. No one should be alone on Christmas Eve." And so they sat, this unlikely group at a table meant for 12. The girls were wide-eyed and silent at first, overwhelmed by the crystal, glasses and heavy silverware and the sheer, impossible magic of this moment. Marcus ordered hot chocolate for them and encouraged them to choose anything they wanted from the menu. Sarah tried to refuse his generosity, tried to explain she could pay for her family's meal, but Marcus shook his head, gently, and said something that made her throat tighten with unexpected tears. "Please let me do this. I haven't had anyone to share Christmas with in a very long time." Over dinner, the conversation flowed easier than Marcus expected. Emma told him about her love of drawing, how she wanted to be an artist someday. Lily shared every detail of the science fair project she was planning. Sarah talked about her background in healthcare, her quiet determination to find work again after the new year, her fierce pride in her daughters. And Marcus found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years, talking about Rebecca, about how success had come at a cost he hadn't fully understood until it was too late, about the daughter and son he loved but had somehow become distant from in the pursuit of the next deal, the next merger, the next achievement. When dessert arrived, chocolate cake with raspberry sauce, Lily looked at it like it was treasure and then asked Marcus if it would be okay to save half to eat later. The question broke something open in his chest. He realized these children, these beautiful, polite, joyful children, didn't take anything for granted. They knew how to be grateful. They knew how to find wonder in small things. They knew things his money had insulated him from learning. As the evening wound down, Marcus did something he'd never done in his entire career-focused life. He asked Sarah if she'd mind if he made a phone call on her behalf. He knew people, he explained. People at the hospital systems throughout Seattle, people who were always looking for skilled medical technicians. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she couldn't speak for a moment, just nodded. But Marcus wasn't finished. He thought about the enormous house sitting empty, about the guest cottage on his property that hadn't been used in years. He thought about how Emily had begged him to volunteer more, to use his resources to help people, to remember where he'd come from before the money and the status. He thought about Rebecca, who'd spent every Christmas volunteering at shelters and soup kitchens, trying to pull him along, trying to teach him what really mattered. He took a breath and made an offer that surprised even himself. The cottage was furnished, he explained. It had heat and hot water and 2 bedrooms. If Sarah needed a place to stay while she got back on her feet, while she found work, it was sitting empty anyway. He'd charge minimal rent, whatever she could afford, or nothing at all until she was working again. He wasn't trying to be a hero, he said. He was just a lonely man who'd been reminded tonight what Christmas was actually supposed to feel like. Sarah cried then, really cried, tears of relief and gratitude and the overwhelming weight of worry finally lifting, just enough to let her breathe. The girls hugged Marcus like he was family, unself-conscious and wholehearted, and he hugged them back, feeling something cold inside him start to thaw. 3 months later, Sarah started work as a senior medical technician at Seattle General, a position Marcus's call had helped arrange, but that she'd earned entirely on her own merit. She and the girls lived in the cottage, which had stopped feeling like charity and started feeling like home. Emma covered the refrigerator with drawings, many of them portraits of Marcus, who visited most Sundays for breakfast. Lily started calling him Uncle Marcus. And Marcus, who'd spent 2 years believing his capacity for joy had died with Rebecca, discovered he'd been wrong. It hadn't died. It had just been waiting for the right moment to wake up again. He thought often about that Christmas Eve, about the decision to invite 3 strangers to his table. It hadn't been generosity, not really. It had been survival, desperation, a drowning man reaching for a lifeline without even knowing it. Those 3 people had saved him just as surely as he'd helped them. They'd reminded him that wealth meant nothing if you had no one to share it with, that success was worthless if it came at the cost of human connection, That the best gift you could ever give or receive was simply showing up for another person when they needed it most. Sometimes the greatest act of kindness is simply making room at your table for someone who's standing in the cold. Sometimes helping another person is how we save ourselves. And sometimes the family we need isn't the one we were born into, but the one we choose. The one we find in unexpected moments on ordinary days that turn out to be extraordinary after all. If this story moved you, share a moment when a stranger's kindness changed your life. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.